This podcast provides a platform for our guests to express their own personal views and opinions. Some or all of these views and opinions may not be shared by Ben and/or Yoel.
Welcome to the Too Dad to Quit podcast,
the podcast where we highlight stories of dads on the other side of divorce
to inspire and give strength to dads going through it.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Yoel.
Welcome back to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. We're available on toodadtoquit.com, Too Dad to Quit on all social media. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment. We want to hear feedback from you and what you want to hear. Share this with anybody that you think might be good for the podcast. And don't forget to rate the podcast. It's very important for us to move up in the rankings so that other people can hear from us, but only if they're 5 stars. No, I'm just kidding. Please rate the podcast. We want to really hear from you and get your feedback so we can continue to grow this podcast and grow our listeners and our viewers. This week, we're sitting with Betzalel Rothstein. Betzalel is a father and a stepfather, and he is very dedicated to helping parents that are having issues connecting and meeting with their children with divorces of conflict. And he especially gets into discussing if you should be particularly strict and rigid about rules, if you're the only parent that is enforcing them, or you should be more lenient. This is something that he feels passionate about. And I think, it was a very heartfelt discussion about his own experience and kind of what he would have done if he could do it all over again.
Yeah, and I love the fact that Betzalel has essentially taken the experiences he's had and the pain he's had through his divorce and his experiences with his own family, and he's using that to help others going through similar issues or maybe issues of their own. And that's really, really a commendable thing that Betzalel is doing. And he was very heartfelt and very open, and I would say vulnerable. I've used that term before for some of our other guests, and Betzalel was not an exception in that regard. He made himself vulnerable to openly and honestly discussing, choices he's made, experiences he's had. I think he even got into some mistakes he's made, and we've all made mistakes. So the fact that he was willing to talk about those was really refreshing, and I know our audience is really going to gain from his insights and experiences.
Yeah, and taking your experiences and learning from it is one thing, but he's also become a mediator, and he started an organization to help others and built a network of support for people going through these rough divorces. And so it was really nice to sit down with him and hear what he's doing and why he's doing it, and enjoy. This week, we are sitting with Betzalel Rothstein. Betzalel Rothstein is a father of 4 daughters from his first marriage, 3 sons, and a daughter in his second marriage, and 1 stepdaughter from his current wife's first marriage. Betzalel is a certified family mediator and divorce coach, and the founder of an organization called Todos. The mission of Todos is to guide parents to make better decisions for their children and themselves if they are already divorced, in the process of divorce, or just considering divorce. Well, Betzalel, I'm honored to have you here. I actually have like 8 connections to your family from all sides. I've known your wife, I guess, since she was probably 10 or less, and also your, I guess, father. And that's also a mixed family as well in Cedarhurst.
Right. Remind me again, how do you know my stepfather?
So the Eric and Melissa are
from NCSY.
Yeah, exactly. So they're from my youth work.
Okay, got it. So Eric and Melissa are my half brother and half sister from my mother.
Got it.
I feel like we're going to need like a graph on the wall here with all the stepbrothers, stepsisters, stepfather.
It would be.
I'm confused, maybe because it's midnight over here. But whereabouts are you from? I maybe I missed it. Where are you?
I'm well traveled. I'm really well traveled. So I was born in Brooklyn, Maimonides Medical Center, Borough Park. And my father actually still lives in Borough Park.
Oh well, my dad grew up.
And and my mother left Borough Park when she got remarried when I was 9 and moved to Mill Basin. And then at 14, my mother and stepfather moved out to the Five Towns, where I remained until I went off to Israel after high school. And then I did 2 years in Israel. And after 2 years in Israel, I did 2 years in yeshiva in Baltimore. And then after my 2 years in yeshiva in Baltimore, I moved in with a friend in an apartment in Far Rockaway. While I was living in Far Rockaway is when I met my first wife, and we spent our first year in Far Rockaway, after which we moved out to her hometown of Elizabeth. We lived in the hillside area of Elizabeth. That's like the newer, younger area out there for those that are familiar with the community. And I stayed there until I got remarried. Spent a couple of weeks in Lakewood and then settled in Highland Park, New Jersey, which are where I've been ever since for the last 11 plus years.
Nice.
Nah, I didn't realize that. I have a
It's been
background there
quite a
too.
journey. What's
No,
that?
it's one of my favorite places in New Jersey.
Highland Park?
Yeah,
There's no place like it. There's no place like it.
it's a pretty cool community.
Wait, are we
Yeah.
the same vintage? I'm 43. Are we the same age? Or are you?
I'm 46.
Were you in Nair in Baltimore? Where?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you remember a guy named David Farkas?
David Farkas. Doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, so forget it. Carry on, Ben.
That's Yoel's famous brother.
He must have been one of the guys that actually went to Shir.
Yes. He's a rabbi. Oh, not a practicing rabbi, but he got his smicha and he did the infamous bittul, the BTL. So, but he was actually learning and studying. So,
right. Yeah.
Anyway,
I was just there to make my shidduch resume look good.
Lakewood
awesome.
did that. No, the freezer. But anyway,
Yeah, no. I'm just it was I made some good friends there. It was quite an experience. But it's all part of the journey. Yeah, and everything I've been through up until now is what has gotten me here.
So on that note, just one thing, because I'm cutting out the David Farkas piece, so I'm going to add in my edits now.
If Ben had his way, he would cut out anything Farkas related, like that square where you see that my face. That would be cut out too. It would just be you and Ben. I don't even know what I'm doing over here. But
I would keep your abs, but anyway.
My abs.
So
all right, Ben, can you steer us in the right direction?
Yes, I will steer you back. Yeah, so that sounds like you've been around and you've had quite the family background experience. Are you close with your father and your parents?
So actually, I mean, I just saw my father this morning. So this morning, I'm just gonna get right to it. There's a lot of stuff going on, I mean, kind of just like reflecting. I feel like my life is a roller coaster, and I really just want like one day at the beach. I just want to just like get off the roller coaster and just have just give me one day I'll get back on the roller coaster. Just give me this one day at the beach to just kind of like recharge my batteries. But so 7 years ago, there was a tragedy that struck our community that a young boy was struck by a car on Shabbos on his way to Pirchei, no less. His mother was walking him and a friend. They were on their way, and it was like a really crazy thing that happened where they turned a corner, and as they were turning the corner, there was a car that jumped the curb.
Wow.
And it happened so fast. They're turning the corner and then boom, the car is there. And the mother, the mother and the friend survived, but this young boy, he didn't make it. And so yesterday was actually this young boy's yard site.
The
And
anniversary of
so,
his death.
yes. And so his classmates who have all turned 13 this year and celebrated their bar mitzvahs respectively, they wanted to honor their classmate who didn't have a bar mitzvah, and so they engaged in a program of learning in his honor, and just trying to like a program of spiritual growth. And this morning was the celebration, the culmination of this learning and this spiritual growth that they wanted to do in his honor. And they did it with, like, there was a father and son studying program this morning. So the fathers of all the boys in the school between 4th and 8th grade were invited to come and sit with their sons and review with them some of what they learned in this boy's honor. And there was a whole breakfast, and it was a really nice program. And the father of this boy who died tragically, and his grandfather, they were all there. And what it brings up for me is that there are times in life where fatherhood is more about who you are as a person individually than what it is about being a father. And what I mean by that is, I'm not always able to be the father that I want to be, but I can always strive to be the type of person that my children should always want to have as a father. And I tell it to a lot of people that I work with, that when divorce comes up, and sometimes you have parallel parenting, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have divergent parenting. And when you're in a situation where the parenting styles are divergent from each other, it's the kids that get caught in the middle. They're learning different sets of values. They're learning different types of behaviors. They have different degrees of respect for parents, adults. They have different thresholds of right and wrong, what's good, what's bad, what's not good, and so on and so forth. And I try to, so typically what happens, like, for example, screen time, it's way out of control. It's probably the number one thing that parents fight over when it comes, divorced parents fight over when it comes to, parenting style, or, homework and going out with friends, and what kind of friends. But let's just, for a minute, go, stick with the screen time. So you have parent A, who is more restrictive of the screen time, and then you have parent B, who's less restrictive of the screen time. So the child is pretty much 100 out of 100 times going to favor the parent that allows more screen time. Why? Because kids like screen time.
When they're young.
What's that?
When they're young.
And when they're old.
When you say favor the parent, what do you mean when you say favor the parent?
So generally speaking, right, kids like candy, right? So kids don't necessarily recognize that you're doing them a favor by saving them from I don't know, cavities, obesity, what have you, by limiting their sugar intake, right? And similarly, kids don't understand and can't appreciate that you're saving their brain cells by limiting their exposure to screen time, by limiting their exposure to TikTok. Because kids today they struggle with the ADD and all that other stuff, which personally I don't really buy into that. I think that this whole ADD, it's really more of, we live in an age of instant gratification. I don't have to do research or anything anymore. I can just Google and I get, all these hits for whatever it is that I'm looking for. So there's no such thing as perseverance or persistence or consistency. It's like, okay, whatever I feel like, I'm in the mood for this. I'm in the mood for that. I want it and I want it now. And if I can't get it now, I'm going to have a temper tantrum. And, that's weakness of character. And kids today, they're not really able to appreciate character building exercise. They really just want the quick fix, and the quicker I can get it, the better. So when I say that they're going to favor the parent that gives them greater screen time exposure, they're like, oh, well, this parent that's giving me more screen time exposure, they must love me more because they're giving me more of what I want. And the parent that gives me less of what I want must be the one that loves me less. This one is more fun to be around. That one is too strict, not as much fun to be around. And the like. But really, it's actually exactly the opposite, right? The parent who's looking to limit the sugar intake, who's looking to promote intellectual stimulation, that's the parent who really cares more. The parent who's willing to step up and accept the challenge and embrace doing the thing that's more difficult rather than take the easy way out, that's the parent who's really parenting. It's like rolling up their sleeves and actually doing the work of what it means to be a parent. Now,
but sorry, 1 second, but you're not suggesting that it's always the case that the stricter parent is doing a better job parenting, are you?
No, I'm not. No. Okay. And see, I'm not promoting strictness, but it's perceived strictness. Well, right? Strictness could be objective, but
or it could depend on the child, right?
Yeah, it could definitely depend on the child. But and I'm glad you're bringing this up, because what happens is that it's really, a lot of it is just like it's perception. There are certainly objective standards that most professionals would abide by, but that just because everybody else is bringing sugary snacks to school, that doesn't make sugary snacks healthy. Just because the majority of the kids have unlimited exposure to screen time doesn't mean that it's healthy developmentally or emotionally or anything like that. To have this unlimited exposure to screen time. So, certainly we could come up with some objective standards, but really the focus here is not so much on how we set the standards. What we're really talking about is a case where you have one parent who is encouraging limited screen time, and you have another parent who is, let's just say, indifferent when it comes to screen time. Yeah, you want to go to your room and be on the screen for as long as you like. Just, yeah, whatever, go do it. Just stay out of my hair. So objectively speaking, who's the parent who cares more about the child? The parent who is looking to limit this screen time, or the parent who says, do whatever you want as long as you stay out of my hair? It's pretty cut and dry that the one who's limiting the screen time is the quote unquote better quality parent in this case. But the child will show more affection, will show more loyalty to the parent who lets them sit in their room with the unlimited and unfiltered screen time, because that's what the kid wants. The same way that the kid wants candy, but the same way that you don't want your child to have all these cavities, you don't want your child to deal with obesity, you also shouldn't want your child to just be exposed to all the garbage that's out there on the internet. But
I'm not
here,
convinced of of your theory, I guess.
not yet,
Uh,
if you will be.
Not yet, because my parents were never married when I was they were barely married for my entire life, and my father would show up once a month and bring me things, and that was how he showed up. I'm assuming with the same theory. I'm going to come in, I'm going to swoop in, I'm going to get you things, and I'm going to be your favorite. But that's not the case at all.
Right.
It was the person who woke me up, picked me up, made me food, was there for me, and I knew who cared and who was the stable one and who was consistent and who
Right.
who gave me a hard time to make sure that I was a productive person.
Right. So what you're saying now really is affirming the point that I'm trying to make here, which is that first of all, I'm really talking more of like a more natural sort of shared parenting time type of situation than the fly by night parent, helicopter in, helicopter out sort of situation, but like where
When
it's a
there's
more
two houses and
yeah,
they have
exactly,
two choices, so to speak.
yes, exactly,
Okay.
yes, something more like that. Listen, we can talk about
I still
those
think it's the
scenarios
same. I still
also.
think it's the same thing,
But
it's harder to
point,
see. But
to your point, um, you know, it's important to. We're mixing up a couple of different things over here, but it's important to be the quality of person that you want to be, rather than just stick to your parenting principles. Because sometimes just by sticking to your parenting principles, you may end up compromising your relationship with your child, because your child it might not be mature enough yet to realize that you're trying to do right by them. Your child might still be at an early enough stage of their maturation where, like, I want candy. I want screen time. And if you're not going to let me have it, I'm going to stay with the other parent who is going to let me have it. You're in trouble when your kids are saying, if you don't give me what my,
but then you're folding for the kid.
well, I call it playing the long game.
Okay.
Because the most important thing to do is to stay connected to your child, and to understand. You have to see the bigger picture. Like your child, has two households. Your child has two sets of values. Your child may not be able to see things the way that you're seeing them. So sometimes what you have to do is you have to parent more of your personality than your lifestyle. So, I don't know, maybe like sit down with your child and help your child, find something that is not less toxic to watch. Let them, find, funny, comedy clips instead of just like the sort of asinine sort of, goofball.
You're saying don't be so black and white, but
don't be black and white. Do not be black. Never be black and white.
But you still need to stay true to your ideals. You shouldn't be compromising those, because that's also a mixed message.
You know what? I think that there are a lot of cases where you just kind of have to throw your ideals out the window, because you're not in an ideal situation anymore. If there's one household and you're married to someone who you can have a conversation with and talk about getting on the same page about how you're going to raise your kids together, that's one thing. But once the child now has two different households, you have to be able to look at the world through the lens of your child. You have to just, do a lot more than only looking at your own lens, because your child is now thrown into a world of conflict, because your child is getting two different messages. The other parent might be, saying, "Oh, I can't believe that you can't watch whatever you want to watch in that household. They're so mean, they're so restrictive. If you don't like it there, you could just spend more time here and attack with them. And then what do you okay, you have your principles, but you just don't have your child anymore. So, like what's more important to you, your child or your principles?
I mean, Yoel, you're very quiet, but um, I think if you stay consistent and you're going between consistent and inconsistent, that the child will, it may not be right away, but that inconsistency is just a lot of confusion, while the consistency teaches boundaries, teaches these character traits you're talking about, teaches a right path to emulate, as opposed to
So
emulating
again,
chaos.
So it really depends. It depends on what the child depends on the child's maturity and what they're dealing with. I mean, I've been involved in hundreds of cases from many different angles, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that there's no such thing as a one fix. Like every case really needs to be judged on its own merits. And even within the same family where there's multiple kids, the kids they take things differently, and it doesn't necessarily matter who's the older, who's the younger, this and that. You really do have to. The one thing that is consistent, in my opinion, is that you must be able and willing to look at the world through the eyes of your child. To me, that is the most important factor, and it is unwavering in every single situation. You always have to try to see, because realize
For sure. I'm not disagreeing with
your
that.
kids never asked for anyone to get divorced. They never asked for any of this, and divorce can be so confusing for the kids. If I'm nice to this one, maybe I'm disloyal to that one. And if I'm nice to that one, maybe I'm disloyal to this one. And why can't I just have my parents all under one roof? And why do I have to go back and forth? And, like they just want a simpler, more stable life. And, I believe that truth always wins out. So, and what I mean by that is I'm really trying to imply that from my perspective, there are certain constant truths in the world, such as consistency is better than chaos. To me, that is a constant truth, kind of like it's a law of metaphysics, if you would. So yes, consistency will always win out over chaos. And if you're the more consistent parent, all you have to do is really just talk about consistency with your child. Just find ways to let your child know that there's consistency in your life. And then ultimately, as your child grows to appreciate consistency, they're going to say, you know what? You were right. Consistency. It's great. Thank you for being that stalwart, that consistent role model in my life. But if you're preaching consistency without also making sure that you really understand where what your child is up to, so then you run the risk of your child thinking that consistency is more important than living, which it's not. You have to be able to find you have to find balance. And when you are able to find that balance, that's really it's a great way to connect with your kids. And the thing is that sometimes it could take a really long time.
I totally agree that I'm not saying that
consistency and your whatever your rules are shouldn't be bent from time to time, but it's also important if you're going to bend them. It comes with a conversation, it comes with an exception, it comes with, this is why we're doing this, this is why I'm doing this at this time. I'm not holding you in a strict format if it's not being helpful to you at this time. Like, you need to 100% hear your kid, see the full picture of what your kid needs. Your need for conformity does not trump your kid's need for flexibility.
Right. And especially
absolutely.
when you consider that, again, the child has another household that is highly flexible. It's, just to use that, to stay consistent with that terminology. The child, might view that as being perfectly normal. Maybe if you're lucky, you have a moment with the child where, let's just say the child has an exam coming up in school, and and the child's struggling to, okay, let me just get back to a little bit of some of my own personal story.
Sure.
So first of all, my four daughters of my first marriage have not spent a night in my house in more than 7 years. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, both boys. They've never met them. They didn't even show up for the bris. I have a 6-year-old daughter. They met once. Now,
your little ones are adorable, by the way.
Thank you. Now, what I could tell you is that I'm the more consistent parent. I always have been the more consistent parent. During the time period where my daughters were an active part of my family, my kids knew that whatever they had, like a book report due, they wanted to be in my house when they had a book report due, because they knew that I and my wife would get it done for them. When they knew that when they slept in my house, they knew that they were going to go to school in matching socks the next day. When they were in my house, they knew where they could find their clothes. My ex lived very close to her parents, and I know that from night to night that my daughters would be with their mother. They wouldn't know from night to night, are they sleeping in their own beds, or are they sleeping by their grandparents? A lot of inconsistency there. But I think that I made the mistake, I made the miscalculation of putting too much stock in the value of the consistency and not having enough flexibility to really see the world through the lens of my daughters, and it's cost me dearly. I only got to go to one bas mitzvah.
What would you have done differently?
A lot. I would have been more flexible. I would have just empathized a lot more. I think I overvalued how amazingly consistent and reliable my household was, and I kind of maybe expected that my daughters would just naturally want to spend more time in my home with the consistency. And also, I think that sometimes I felt taken advantage of. That, I was the one who always had to help prepare for a test, and we never really got to have fun with my girls because there was always a test to get ready for. There was always a report to get done. There was always a something, and it might be, 2, 3, 4 weeks away, but my oldest daughter, who was she was pretty studious and aware. It's like, oh, I have this project that's due in 4 weeks. I'm only going to have 2 weekends in my father's house to get it done. So for the next 2 weekends that I'm with my father, we have to start working on this a month in advance because I'm not going to have that much time to have somebody actively help me with it. And, like, nobody wants to do homework all the time. Even parents don't want to do homework all the time. Like, we like seeing the kids get the homework done, but, we kind of like want them to be a little bit more independent. Like, I want to take my kids to the park. I want to have, outing. I want to do like, regular, normal family kind of stuff. But that kind of became limited because we were so damn responsible and reliable. But I guess that I shouldn't have been bothered being taken advantage of. I wasn't actually being taken advantage of. I was doing my job. My job is to take care of my kids. That's my job. I want my kids to be taken care of. And when they're not taken care of, that hurts.
Were you also the homework person during the marriage as well?
No, they didn't really have a homework person because, there was, during, like, certainly towards the end of the marriage, the different, like, while we were married, I was really trying to find myself. I think that, looking back, I don't know that getting married to my ex was my best decision ever.
How long were you married?
We were married for about 7.5 years.
Yeah.
How old were you when you got married?
When I got married, I was a couple of weeks shy of my 25th birthday.
And she was young, much younger.
She was 19. Yeah, listen, my current wife is even more younger than me. Anyway, so right, as far as like how did homework get done when I was married, it probably didn't. So again, I was during the marriage, I was really like finding my way a lot. So I didn't really have a profession. I had worked at a company called IDT, where like half the Jewish world has worked there at one time or another.
Yeah.
Like, if you didn't work there yourself, somebody who did.
That's
your
right.
brother, your uncle, your cousin, your neighbor, somebody. So I was, I went through their turnstiles. And then I got laid off in 2000 when like a lot of those like that technology bust and a lot of those a lot of the .com companies. We weren't really a .com company, but we were in that tech world.
Right.
I ended up getting laid off, and then I just kind of like meandered for a while, kind of like floating between jobs. My ex ended up helping me get a job in the Diamond District, and I spent a couple of years working in the Diamond District, and like all this time, my ex was kind of pushing me, like, like go back to school, like study like a trade, like like learn a profession. So because I had some experience with technology, I thought maybe computer programming. My brother Eric,
Yeah.
he's a programmer. My stepfather's a programmer, so there's a lot of technology in the household. I tried that, and I think I could have been good at it. I couldn't get past calculus. I took calculus 3 times, and I couldn't pull better than a C, because it was needed for the degree, it had to be a B or better,
Mhm.
and and like 3 strikes and I was out. So it was like, okay, try accounting. I was like, no, and like, ugh.
More math.
It wasn't really but it's different kind of math, but it's just like so boring. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
it was not, I kind of, okay, so maybe he's gonna be a lawyer. Um,
Going down the list of professions. I love it. Yeah.
yeah, I would have taken my BTL, and I studied for the LSAT. I was, and I did okay on the LSAT. Just not well enough to get into a good program with only a BTL.
Mm.
So I tried that, and so I was out of the house a lot because I was working, and then I was going to school, and then towards the end, when I just kind of like gave up on the whole profession thing, and I was working on 47th Street. I was doing a lot of traveling. I was like Midwest region sales manager for a jewelry manufacturer. So I did a
You had
lot of
children at this
traveling.
time, right?
What's that?
You had children already at this
Yeah,
time.
yeah. I had kids. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, listen, my ex got pregnant the first time that she came back from the mikvah. So, I mean, I don't know how you want to explain mikvah to your non-Jewish
I'll let
listeners.
Ben's not.
I'll do it. From the ritual bath. We'll go with that.
But listen, let me put it like this. My first daughter was born less than a year after we got married. So like we were having kids right away, and we just had more and more kids. Ta-da! 4 kids in 7.5 years. Do the math.
Wow.
And I traveled a lot, and I went to school at night. I don't know how it happened.
Didn't you guys have a television or something? Speaking of screen time.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Coming from a guy with 5 kids over there.
I smoked them.
He had a television. Anyway. And now back to our program.
And now you lost our Sony sponsorship. Thank you.
Not if editing Ben could help it. Ben's got his scissors out. He's going to be chomping and chopping at the bit.
Oh yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I hope you're good.
So
anyway,
when did you finally find yourself?
Right. So hang on a second. So first of all, I definitely feel like I I made the mistakes of really not trying to see the world through the perspective of my daughters. So that was really that's something I definitely wish that I would have done differently. How did I find myself? So
I just want to did when you say that though, I don't know if you talked about this before. Did your daughters express things to you and you just weren't present at the time, or it was nothing they expressed to you? It just, you feel like maybe you could have tried to see it from their perspective. Like, were there any cues or indications that you?
So yeah, there were definitely cues, but not the cues, no cues that I don't remember there being any cues that were directly expressed from my daughters. It was more kind of like how they acted up, so to speak. So when my ex and I first divorced, we were actually doing what's commonly referred to as nesting. So
Right.
for those of you who are not familiar with the concept of nesting, it basically means that the children stay in the marital home 100% of the time, and the parents leave, when the other one has their parenting time. So
Did you
when
share an
we
apartment for that? Or did
no,
you
no,
each
she
have your
went to
own place?
I basically, so part of the reason that we were able to do this was because we were broke after the divorce. We both ended up declaring personal bankruptcy after the divorce.
Oh wow.
I did it first. She copied me. Um,
Wow.
anyways, but her parents lived nearby, so she would go stay in the parents when I was with the kids. And when I rented the I rented a studio apartment a couple of blocks away. So like literally, like I could walk. I could walk to see the kids. And everything was like super cooperative, like, okay, so we're just not going to live together, we're going to we're going to look out for the kids, and everything was seemingly fine up until I introduced my daughters to the woman who would not too much later become my wife.
Mm.
And as soon as my ex had learned that my daughters had met a woman that I was in a relationship with, that was the end of the nesting. That was the end of the niceties.
Mm.
Mm.
Really, it was that tangible. Like you were able to sort of.
Oh yeah, it
pinpoint.
was instantaneous. It was like it was expressly that. And so from that point on, when my daughters would be spending the night with me, we would all cram into my little studio apartment.
Wow.
Which my daughters actually, like, later on, they would tell me that they loved those days. They really appreciate it. It was like it was a whole to do. I had these fold away cots, and I had a futon, and so so like, and the futon would double as a couch. So when it came to be bedtime, so the futon would open up.
All
It would,
activity.
yeah, it was a whole, like, turn over the whole apartment, and we did it, and it worked, and the kids were happy with it, because it was our space, and they appreciated it. And and again, like, Shabbosim, that we all davened at the same shul,
Right.
and
At the
if
same
if
synagogue.
yeah, if we would go out for a meal with with neighbors, like, it would be like the same kids that they would play with if they were with their mother. Everything was, like, consistent. It was really good for the kids, even though now they had to, like, go back and forth, but they
Mhm.
really didn't have any issue with that whatsoever. um when I got married, so then things started to change a little bit, because um my wife and I decided that it would really be best for our marriage to start up in a different community, rather than
Mm.
for me to live in the same community as my ex with my new wife. And again, like, things were already strained between me and my ex, and they kind of just, like, became more and more strained as we progressed towards the wedding. In fact, like, the kids, like, my daughters almost missed my wedding because we ended up in court, and
Wow.
I had to win a court case, in order to have my daughters be allowed to attend my wedding. Things were ugly,
Is your ex-wife
for the
remarried
most.
now, by the way?
My ex-wife is divorced a second time already.
But I was going to ask, did you note when she got remarried? Did you notice any difference in terms of your communications with her?
There was no there was no difference.
Mm.
There was no difference. In fact, I think that when my ex was getting remarried, then I think that at that time she felt like she could find a stepfather for my daughters who would replace me.
Hmm.
That, not only
How
was
did you
she,
feel about it? How did you feel about it from your perspective? Like, did
I was happy for her that she was getting. I was thinking like, oh, maybe now that she's getting remarried, maybe now she'll chill out. I had no issue if she like that doesn't do with me, like, oh, listen, maybe she'll get her, maybe she's getting her life together,
you
like,
didn't feel threatened by the
no,
man she was with or anything? Okay.
no, not at all.
Okay.
How would I be? No, I have no reason to be threatened.
No, I'm not saying there was. I'm just curious.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, no. I mean, listen, I get it that sometimes people do feel threatened, but this is like another kind of mistake that people make in divorce and second marriages and things like that, where you're imagining the threat that doesn't actually exist, and you like literally you make it real. In fact, I was listening to a class that was like discussing um like like negative spirits, so to speak, and like are these, let's just say, ghosts, right, for lack of a better term, but the class was talking about like how does the Jewish religion feel about ghosts? Are they real or not? And again, I'm not just, don't take me at face value here. There's a lot more to it. I'm just speaking very superficially. And and so the instructor said ghosts are entirely imaginary, but they're very, very dangerous. And the student says, well, if they're entirely imaginary, how can they be so dangerous? Because it's your imagination that makes it real.
I just had the same conversation with my daughter. I went out for like 10 minutes and she called me 3 times and I said, I can't talk right now. What's going on? And she messaged me, I heard the thing outside. And I came home and I called her right as soon as I was available. And I said, you're only going to hear things if you're listening for them. If you're not waiting for some noise to happen, you won't even notice anything that's going outside. So just close everything, lock the doors. You'll be fine. You're home. I'll be back in 3 minutes. Everything is fine. But as soon as you start listening for things, you're going to hear them. The exact same conversation.
Yeah. So, your imagination is definitely capable of making things real. Your emotions are capable of making things real. So, when you're focused on yourself, you make yourself more real. And when you're focused on what everybody else thinks of you or how you perceive that everyone else thinks of you, then you are creating all of these imaginary perceptions of yourself, which, terribly unhealthy behavior pattern. There's no good that's going to come from that. But anyway, yeah. So when my ex got remarried, I thought nothing of it. But she ratcheted things up because I think that she for herself felt more secure for herself that she was getting remarried. So how did we get here? Because you asked about, did I see any signs? So I think that the signs that I saw were like more of a subtle nature in my daughters, that they were acting up more in my house. They were more disrespectful, more aggressive, with each other.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. They were, yeah. And like, really, like, like for me, like I said to my kids all the time, I was like, I don't want to see anybody pull my daughter's hair, even if it's my own daughter. You know, I mean, especially if it's my own daughter, because like you guys, sisters,
your family, you got to take care of each other.
Exactly. So, like that's something that like really my tolerance for that was always very low, and even now it's pretty low. I don't like seeing any of my kids ever be mean to each other. I don't like to see anybody be mean to my kids, even if it's their own sibling. And again, especially if it's their own sibling. But I realized that like a lot of that infighting that my ex had a much higher tolerance for it than I did. And what kids like to do? They like to push the limits. They like to test the boundaries. And we are all too quick to fail those tests with flying colors, because we want to flex our muscle and exert our authority and show who's the boss. You want to see boundaries? I'm going to show you boundaries. Yeah, that's bad. That's really bad. What's really, really more effective is like, oh, you think you're going to manipulate me by testing my boundaries? Well, I'm just going to show you that you can't manipulate me. I am not anything like what you think I am. That's a very important, subtle message. It's a critical and subtle message that is so important for every parent to be able to convey to their child. You have to be unpredictable, because your kids will figure out your playbook very quickly, very, very quickly. And they will figure out how to manipulate you. You have to be, you cannot allow yourself to be manipulated. You have to be spontaneous. You have to be unpredictable. You have to know their playbook better than they know yours, which theoretically any parent should be able to accomplish that. And the only thing that would ever stop a parent from being able to accomplish that would be their own stubbornness. Like, no, why do I have to figure out I'm the boss. I'm just going to be the boss. I'm like, okay, listen, what good is it to be the boss when all your employees quit on you?
Yeah.
And, and that's, that is unfortunately something that sometimes happens, where the kids will, you want to get your kid out of bed. Like, I'm not going to school today. Like, what are you going to do? Forcibly pick your child up. And I tried that once, and it was stupid. It blew up in my face terribly. But I thought at the time, I thought I was doing the right thing by being the boss. And really what my child needed was not a boss. My child needed compassion. And the thing is that you have to understand that, if your ex is the more flexible parent, the less consistent parent. So your ex is the one who lets the kids have more candy. Your ex is the one who lets them fight with each other more. Your ex, so on and so forth. The perception is that you are the more strict parent. You're the less compassionate one. You're the bossier one. You're the one whose love and affection is more conditional. And so the child is curious. My other parent says that when I'm in the other one's house, that they don't really love me. It's all conditional. Well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to test this theory. I'm not going to get out of bed. I'm not going to get dressed for school. And I'm going to see, is my parent going to yell and scream at me and throw me into the car in my pajamas to take me to school? Because if they do that, then I know that this is not the parent that really loves me. If you knew that this was what your child was thinking, if you knew that you were being tested, you would never, ever throw your kid into the car in their pajamas, because you know that the child just wants to test you. The child just wants to know that they're loved unconditionally. That's all the child really wants. So the child would just want, so in that instance, like, yes, absolutely. You do have to, absolutely 100 out of 100 times, you compromise on your principle of getting your kid to school on time. Because if you don't do that, you jeopardize your ability to get them to school on time ever. it's like this is a learning moment for you and for your child. It's a learning moment for you that you get to put your child above yourself. And it's a learning moment for your child that your child gets to see that you're not necessarily the way that the other parent portrays you to be, that you are capable of going off book. And that's a really, really important message, for any parent, married, divorced, whatever, it's a really important concept to have, that to be able to go off book once in a while for the benefit of your relationship with your child.
Sure.
Anyway,
so fast forward.
Yeah.
So you got remarried. You have now three additional kids.
4 kids, 3 boys, 1 girl,
Got
and a stepdaughter. So technically
it.
5.
And a partridge in a pear tree.
Yes.
And you started also. You're now a certified family mediator.
Yeah.
And you have your own practice, because I
Yes.
saw some things where you kind of worked with some organizations. Now you actually officially have your own.
Yes, correct.
And what is that? What's the name of that?
The name of the organization is called Toldos. So
Okay.
Toldos in Hebrew has 2 definitions. One is that it refers to children, and the other definition is that it refers to consequences. And the idea behind the organization is to serve parents who are either, whether they're thinking about getting divorced, or they're in the process of divorce, or they're post-divorce and they don't like, there's something that they don't like about their situation. We want to be able to provide for anyone who needs it, divorce coaching, divorce mediation, any sort of services that can de-escalate conflict between parents, or to help parents become better parents.
And are these paid services? Is it a nonprofit? How does that work?
It is a nonprofit organization. Generally, so the services are subsidized.
Okay.
So there has to be we encourage our clients, those who approach the organization, we encourage everyone to have some skin in the game, so to speak. It really, because people need to buy in. What I found is that
literally and figuratively.
Yeah, I was saying to someone this morning, it's unfortunate, like, somebody was referred to my organization like, wow, like, you're saving so many lives. The reason that I founded this organization is because, once I was on the path to getting remarried, my divorce got really ugly. My divorce got really ugly after I was divorced. It wasn't the divorce that was so bad. It was, what came later, which sometimes that happens. Like, listen, there's some cases where it's the divorce that's a miserable experience. Then afterwards it cools down. And then sometimes it's the divorce that's not so bad. And then later, sometimes it's the marriage, whatever, there's different flavors for all. But the thing is that, I didn't have any place to turn to. No one was really able to give me good advice. There was no hotline that was available for me to call when things started getting really nasty in my divorce. And there were a lot of people who had very good intentions and tried to give me sage advice. Just it wasn't the right advice, because contentious divorce, it's a very difficult topic to navigate. It's a very, very difficult topic to have, very complicated, especially with kids involved. I really felt the need that there needs to be a hotline, that somebody who is at any stage of divorce, they need to be able to call a hotline and have somebody with knowledge and experience be able to answer difficult questions and to connect parents who are struggling with very complicated co-parenting situations with other parents who are struggling with similar situations, so that they know that they're not alone, and they could, just like share intel with each other and connect with each other. Like, I don't know, like my kid is trying to ransom me to buy them a car. My kid is on all of these meds because they're so depressed because of everything that's going on between me and my ex. Whatever it is, but it's unfortunate. So many parents just feel alone and disconnected when they're going through this stuff, and like they feel like, like, why me? And they, again, it's just like, the feeling of isolation. So we have really a global network of parents that are connected through this organization, just to give each other support and show up for each other. And I'm not only the president, I'm also a client.
I just used that line recently, actually. I love that. Yeah.
And
Do parents
it-
typically? Oh, go ahead, Ben.
is it really global? The
Yeah.
services are also global, or just
Um,
the
well,
community is global?
I mean, Zoom and WhatsApp are really powerful tools. There's so many tools available that can connect people from all over the world. So there are members of my network that are obviously from the United States, from Israel, from the UK. Those are the primary. Yeah, it's America, Israel, and UK where I have members, but really could be from anywhere. So yeah, there's global reach there.
Do parents is it the case that usually one of the ex-spouses will come to you, or do they come together? How does it work generally? Like, who's coming to you?
Yeah. So generally, usually the parent who's quote unquote losing is the one who's coming to me for help. Like the one who, who, like, the kid doesn't want to go to their house anymore because, again, I mean, let's just say, for example, it's too rigid, or the parent who just got slapped with a restraining order is coming to me. The parent who can't afford their child support and is being threatened by their ex to, they're going to go to jail, is coming to me. Those are, now, those are the ones, like, who are coming looking for the support group. But I also have, again, I have couples who want to get divorced, don't have a lot of money, and they don't want it to be ugly. They can't even afford for it to be ugly because they just don't have the resources, and they're looking for an affordable, quick, non-contentious way to get divorced. They know people who went to lawyers, and they're coming to me for mediation services because they know that things tend to get hostile when the lawyers are involved.
Are
So
you mediating with attorneys? I mean, like, because there is an agreement that has to be prepared in that
right.
case. So is there an attorney? Do you have an attorney on staff, or do you work with attorneys who help you finalize agreements that you're able to reach with your clients?
Right. So
And the second part of that is that how do you sort of mediate if you're not a lawyer yourself when you're dealing with legal issues involved?
So I am familiar with family law. Like I study family law. That was part of my mediation training, is to understand the family law. So that's number one. And number two is, yes, the mediation agreement does have to be a legal document. So I'll work with the couple to come up with the terms, and then either I'll give the framework to one of the spouses to take it to a lawyer to have that framework codified to be a legal divorce agreement. I also have a paralegal service that I work with, that I'll give them, like, depending on what the couple wants, and I might give it over to the paralegal service to have it codified into a legal document. So a couple could come to me and really have one-stop shop, and I could really take care of everything from start to finish for their divorce, including getting it filed through an attorney. I do always encourage every couple to have my documents reviewed by an attorney. And I do also, I have I have cases where the spouse wants to bring an attorney to mediation, and that's okay too. Better that we try mediation, even if it, by the time someone's getting divorced, they've been through a lot. It doesn't just, more and more, the threshold for divorce is kind of not as high as it used to be. But I wouldn't turn anybody away just because they want to bring an attorney to mediation. And listen, unfortunately, I can't close every case. I've never heard of a mediator who could close every case. We try our best. I think that
takes two to tango.
Even just but that being said, I think that every couple that at least tries mediation benefits from it. Because a lot of what I do is I try to help the same way I was talking about how, parenting, a lot of it is about seeing life through the lens of your child. I encourage each spouse to try to see the divorce experience through the lens of their spouse. Now, a lot of spouses are resistant to it. Like, you want me to look at life through the lens of that animal, that disgusting, vile creature? I'm not going to do that. I'm like, okay, but, just like recognize that, number one is you have children with this person. And number two is, maybe you're seeking financial support from that person. Maybe you own a house together with that person. And the two of you need to figure out how to divide the equity in that house. So, listen, I understand that you absolutely, yes, I understand that to you, this other individual is just wretched, loathsome, and all that. And like, okay, so let's say that that's true, right? Let's say that that's true. So then you're going to have to go to a lawyer. You have to put down a $10,000 retainer. You're looking at, you're looking at about $50,000, just if your divorce is not too contentious, you're looking at $50,000 you're going to spend on that. If you work with me, an expensive mediated divorce is $10,000. That's like on the high end. Typically, my fees don't run that high, partially because if I see it's not going anywhere, I'll cut them loose. Like, this is not. I'm not going to just like mediate.
Like my mediator was not a great experience, but she also said she doesn't deal with contentious divorces and was gonna she kept threatening. Like, I just don't deal with conflict. I don't deal with conflict. And like, she also knew that we didn't have the money to kind of do any alternative. And it was just a horrible experience.
A mediator that doesn't deal with conflict, I'm sorry to say, Ben, is not a mediator. I'm not speaking about yours. I don't know your personal mediator. I'm just making a general comment.
No, you're right, because
that is the definition of mediator.
If you can't handle, if the couple's not in conflict, then what do they even need a mediator for? They could just sit down and write it up themselves on the back of a napkin.
Right. That's kind of what I was
like. If you can't, people say, oh, do you take difficult cases? Like, heck yeah. Bring them up. Like, what do you think I'm here for? Like, that's why I pay, people pay me for my professional services, because they help navigate people through conflict.
But Sal, just so I'm clear, I can understand when both sides come to you together. It doesn't have to be together, but both sides are in agreement to use your services. But what about the case, like you said, where one side feels like he or she is losing, quote unquote, right? Like, are you able to get another, ex-spouse or potential ex-spouse who may be resistant? Will you reach out to them and say I
have no problem. I have no problem reaching out. The question is, are they going to take my call?
Right. How often? That's what I wanted to ask. I'm assuming you don't keep stats on this, but would you say it's rare for somebody to take your call, or people, Out of
Yeah, and
10
this and,
times, how many
and
people would
yeah.
accept your invitation to mediate, let's say, to put it,
Yes.
to make
So
it simple, obviously.
right. So in those cases where somebody's already losing badly and they're coming to me with their tail between their legs,
Right. Their leverage is
yeah,
not great.
yeah, there's they don't take the call that often, and in that case, they're not necessarily coming to me for a mediator. They're coming to me for my support network, and they're coming to
Got it.
me for to coach them and
You'll
to help
change hats
them.
depending on the needs of what your client's
Yeah,
circumstance.
yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes they're coming from me. Sometimes they're coming from my network.
Got it. Got it. Wait, sorry, when
Yeah.
you say network, because I'm just a bit unclear. When you say what does that mean? Your network? You'll meet like what does that mean by network? Who's in your network?
So again, so I have this support group, like this global support group of um over 100 parents that are at some stage of divorce related conflict, where usually there's like a hostile parent in the picture who's trying to alienate the children from a parent, or trying to financially bankrupt the other parent, like even if they're not like directly like trashing the other parent, but navigating the divorce in such a way that this parent is going to be very unattractive to the kids when the dust settles.
Right.
So there again, like I said, like I have this network of parents, and I give them a forum to connect on. Say, oh, I just got summoned to court by my ex. I don't have money to pay. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't afford my child support. My kids don't want to talk to me. I feel like jumping off the bridge. And again, there's like a whole network of people who will just like respond, like, kind of like Facebook, but like, not as open. It's a private group, and I vet all the members before they're admitted. It's like, don't jump. We're here for you. You're going to get through this. That kind of group.
And if a couple comes to you, do you ever kind of try to convince them that it's not a good idea, or try therapy, or any of that?
Sure.
Or you're just
Sure.
on the other side?
Listen, no, listen. The best way to keep a couple out of a contentious divorce is to keep them from getting divorced. That's number one. You want to prevent a contentious divorce, prevent divorce. I think that a lot of divorces don't have to happen, and do. A lot of divorces that should happen don't. Number one is I really try to help the couples that I work with. I try to help them find clarity. I'm not pro-divorce. I'm not anti-divorce. Divorce is an institution that is a good option for certain individuals, and it's not a good option for others. And and everybody has their own criteria. And
what is your criteria? You mentioned some people shouldn't be divorced and are getting divorced.
Right.
How would you explain who those people are?
Well, okay, so let's say you have a drug addict, for example, or an alcoholic, and the spouse wants to initiate divorce because they don't like being married to an addict. So I would say send the addict for rehab and see if I was like, well, first I was like, did you even try rehab? Like, did you go to an AA meeting, or something? Like try, give it a shot before you get look at how many, there's, umpteen thousands of members of Alcoholics Anonymous. You can't listen to the radio without hearing about a rehab clinic opening up somewhere. So obviously there are a lot of resources for, whether you're addicted to OxyContin or whatever, like all the pain meds that people are all addicted to these days. So for example, addiction, I think is something that that shouldn't necessarily be grounds for divorce if the addict is willing to go to rehab. So there are a couple of customers. I was like, I don't, I think you'd be making a mistake if the addict says I don't want to go to rehab, so then okay, fine, you don't want to go to rehab, you're getting divorced. But if you are willing to go to rehab, then maybe we can work on saving the marriage. If finances, couples that struggle financially are under a lot of stress, and often because of that stress, the spouses struggle to connect with each other and have a meaningful marriage because they're just always so stressed and high strung and whatever it is they're worried about. Money does not necessarily cure all problems. And if you thought you were struggling financially before you got divorced, wait till you see what life is like after divorce. Your financial struggles are only going to be that much worse. There are problems that divorce doesn't cure. So if the problem is not really the finances, the problem is how you're dealing with the stress, that you're not leaning into each other through this hardship, and somebody's struggling to to find a stable job. Maybe if there's history of unemployment there, where's the unemployment coming from? So there's a lot of issues under the surface that I would try to unpack before I would say, oh yeah, listen, I don't know why, certainly, you don't want to be married to this person who can't put bread on the table.
Right. I have another interesting question. I'm looking at our stats, and over 60% of our listeners are 35 to 44. Okay. Is that a similar age range you see coming to you for help?
Probably yes. Yeah.
I need to look into it deeper, but I find that very, very interesting. So how do we find this Toldos organization, and for any of our listeners that want to?
www.ourtoldos.org. OURTOLDOS.org is the address for an organization. Now, the webpage is under construction. That's under reconstruction. So there's not much there right now. If you wanted to find me, you can find my mediation practice online at www.shalomfamilymediation.com. That's SHALOMFAMILYMEDIATION.com. The word shalom in Hebrew means peace. And that's the mindset there is to help people find their peace in the chaos.
Amazing.
Life is chaotic, like no matter what, life is going to be chaotic. And whether you want to be a good spouse, whether you want to be a good parent, you have to be able to to find your own inner peace in order to be a functional human being.
Yeah, and a good spouse. And parent, which brings us to our second to last question. So yes, you touched on a lot of things here that are the basis of us starting this podcast, Too Dad to Quit. And that same note, we like our guests to always share their Too Dad to Quit moment, a moment when you felt that you were an amazing father and you felt all that dad pride, and you just saw a scene in front of you and you were like, man, I am the dad. And, we want you really to share that moment with us, if you can.
Well, I'm going to burst your bubble here. And, I think if you really want to live as the dad you have to make those types of moments every single day. There's no such thing as the moment. There are moments every single day that, you know, so I mean, I shared you, like, I'm 46 already, and you know, like, I'm close to, I feel like I'm close to 50, and you know, like, time, like, it just, like, it flies by. You know, even just like week to week, like, you know, you go, like, you know, Sunday to Sunday to Sunday, like, oh my God, like, where did the whole week go? And you know, I think that you don't want to be one of those people who's kind of just like coasting. You know, you want to be one of those dads who, you know, like, when you see your kid in the morning, or when you're putting your kid to bed at night, that, like, just like pause for that moment and be like, wow, like, I'm so blessed. um I think for me, like, those moments are really about being able to enjoy the blessing that is being a dad, more than it is about, like, taking pride, like, oh, I'm the dad, like, wow, like, you know, like, hey, God, thank you for blessing me with these amazing kids.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
Love that
Amazing.
answer.
And the last thing we like to leave our guests with is, our listeners with, is that, this podcast is put out there to help guys going through divorce, thinking about divorce, dads that, just thinking, it's so rough. I don't know if I can do it. Is this the right thing? How do I get through it? And some advice you would give to those dads that, are going through divorce or thinking about divorce, that you would leave them with.
Yeah, so again, it goes back to a, I guess, like, kind of like a tagline that I mentioned earlier, which is, if you can't be the dad that you want to be the person that your kids want to be their dad. You know, if if you do get, somebody who is divorced, so some days you're with your kids and some days you're not. And when you make that transition from being a full-time dad, or to parenting full-time to parenting part-time, so a lot of times it leads to just like feeling like destabilized, like to like losing that anchor, losing that focus of like, okay, like, like, my life like revolves so much around my kids. So I think that the idea is that your life should always revolve around your kids. Like, always, like, don't do something that, if your kids saw you doing it, they wouldn't be proud of. Like, always try to do something that your kids will be proud of. Like, create a name for yourself that if your kids bump into somebody on the street, they're like, oh, Ben Stern's your dad? I love Ben Stern. He's such a great guy. Yoel Farkas is your dad. Like, he's such a yummy guy. Like, always, like, let that
Yummy, I like that.
be let that be, your drive, that when your kids bump into somebody, that they're like, oh wow, like, your kids go to a wedding, like, oh, what's your last name? Your last name's Rothstein. Are you related to Rothstein in Highland Park? Like, you are. Oh my God, like, you're such a good family. So
Amazing.
even when your kids are not with you, let them be with you in spirit, that you should create those moments for them.
That's all. I love that. So thank you very much, Betzalel. But
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Betzalel.
Before you leave, I'd like to remind our listeners that this is Too Dad to Quit podcast. We want to share your story. We want to help others out there. Everybody has a story that has something to learn from. And please reach out to us on toodadtoquit.com, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We are everywhere, and we really want to share your story. And we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Too Dad to Quit podcast. Available at toodadtoquit.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.